Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Jess from Kentucky to Tokyo. On Wednesdays we do the Japan News Roundup. The coronavirus stories are as so. We have gone down. It is now in a slump. Please be careful about COVID-19. In Tokyo we keep having a fluctuation between 10, 12, 14 cases of COVID-19. Please be careful, continue to wash your hands and wear a mask, but so far so good. Now let's talk about some really heavy topics. I want to put up some disclaimers and some content warnings before we get started. First off, I am not a journalist. I have said this before, so don't use me as a source for news. I see news and then I react to it and I give my opinions. That's it. I am not reporting on anything. It is just me talking about things happening in Japan, specifically in Tokyo. Okay. 2, we are about to talk about racism. We are about to talk about framing narratives about racism, and we're also going to talk about police brutality and Black Lives Matter around the world, which I am in support of. If you have an issue with police brutality or in some kind of assault, things would be triggering for you. Perhaps this is not the video for you. So, first off, on the docket, I had, I think, 3 different people ask me to cover this. NHK. NHK is the National Japan News Agency. There are many jokes about NHK, specifically pertaining to the NHK man. The NHK man comes knocking on your door and you say, "Nihongo tabemasen," to make him go away. Because the NHK man is making you sign up to pay for NHK every month for Niseien, or actually every 2 months for Niseien. It's like BBC, basically. If you're in Britain, BBC also demands that you pay so that BBC can continue running. It is government-sponsored news, that kind of deal. NHK had a segments for Black Lives Matter on TV. And then it has a Twitter account called Sekai no Ima. On Sekai no Ima, NHK decided to have a video up depicting a certain part of Black Lives Matter that talked about wage disparity. But the framing of it was big racist. So, it's really difficult, though, when you talk about, say, anime, cartoons, and racism, and framing narratives of racism, because when it comes to videos as a visual medium, it's not the same as, say, a speech or words that are particularly racist directly. We have to look at it as an overall and framing devices that are used in depicting something that is racist or offensive. It depicted as the narrator a black man who had these bulging, anatomically impossible muscles that were all over the place, and he was a very angry black man. He was not a calm, cool, collected black man who was just calmly explaining about the wage disparity. No. He was angry and shouting and rage-filled, and he had on a sleeveless white shirt, aka also referred to as a wife beater in English. So, it didn't look great. And he was very angrily shouting and angrily stomping his feet and shouting at the heavens and so on and so forth. He was talking about the wage disparity. He was talking about how Corona has affected black people, 45% of African Americans losing their jobs, and due to Corona, and because of white people also having significantly more benefits. I think it was about 7 times more benefits than the average black person. Now, when I say that, that sounds like information that, sure, and on paper, that information sounds like, okay, sure, that sounds like good information to tell people. However, the way it was depicted was, once again, him shouting, being angry, stomping, yelling at this random white person who was significantly smaller, skinnier, and just overall looking very submissive in the face of the angry black man. And the angry black man narrator was squeezing a purse And the purse was like, had eyes and seemed to be like crying as like the black man was holding it. Like it looked violent. On top of that, it had him talking about why everybody is now angry and upset, and as it did that, it panned out and the camera started showing black people here, black people here, black people here in cartoon form in various caricatures that were also still, yet again, not good. And then they were stomping around, throwing things on fire, and rioting and looting. Okay, let's discuss and unpack a lot of this. So, again, on paper, the information about losing jobs due to COVID-19, not incorrect. A lot of black people did, in fact, lose their jobs due to COVID-19. Why? Because a lot of minority people, when it comes to the economy and it comes to jobs, they are often part-time workers, and they're often less likely than white workers to get full-time jobs. Now, I don't know if many people know this about America, but it's kind of become this like part-time economy. And there's actually some significant data that talks about how under Trump it's gotten worse, and more people are part-time job workers, and very, very few full-time jobs have now opened up. There are a lot of reasons for this. This is particularly problematic when you make more and more protections for people who are in CEO positions, or you can have more offshore accounts, and et cetera, or you can hide your money, basically. But also, it's because employee protections and unions have died off. So, part-time workers are abundant, even though they might be working full-time hours. But in particular for COVID-19, minorities were in a really bad position because either they worked or they didn't get money. And those were the two options. And there were many news stories talking about how black people suffered some of the worst death tolls from COVID-19. And this goes back to racism within the medical community, of which I am not an expert on, but there are some news articles that do talk about it, and there have been some exposés that discuss how even when in childbirth, black women are often considered like, I don't know how to just like strong enough to like deal with the pain. They're not given enough painkillers to go through the birthing process. Or if they complain of, say, something that is so painful that they can't handle it, and then they turn out to die. Mortality rates for black women in childbirth are still significantly high in America. So we have the medical racism. It's there. It's in our society, and it's something that we should be working on, and we should be trying to like talk about. So we have the economic disparities, the poverty wage gap. Okay. When you're framing a narrative device that you're trying to get information out to the public, and you're trying to get information that's supposed to be sympathetic, you shouldn't be trying to depict people as supremely angry and also intimidating and scary, because that is how this black man narrator was depicted out into the world. It's really hard to explain, but in this video, the colors are ugly, and the way that like they depict the city around the black man in this video was worn down and grungy and ugly and dirty, and it kind of like when it invokes the idea of like the quote-unquote ghetto, the idea of living somewhere that is, you know, due to systematic racism and institutionalized racism has, you know, seen better days because white people kind of tend to push black people into areas that they consider less good, and then they take over and gentrify areas that they want instead. Okay, now, so there's all that. But then on top of this, just in general, a lot of these depictions of black people, they're very much stereotypes, very much things that shouldn't be here in 2020. They should very much be somewhere in the decades earlier of, say, the 1970s or 80s, back when, quote-unquote, we didn't know better. But we do and should know better by now that framing black people as angry and intimidating and scary is racist. You shouldn't be doing that. Now, you might be like, oh, okay, but the rioters and the looters and all the protests in the news, that's not what the topic of conversation was about. And also, that's not why people are angry and rioting and looting. The core reason for why people are angry, rioting, looting, and fighting with police is because of police brutality. It has to do with systematic and institutionalized racism that has black people being killed on camera and then the police getting away with it constantly, all the time. They should be charged with murder. They should have an investigation where they do time in jail. They should have an investigation where they do time in prison. They should be charged with homicide if it is pretty blatant and on video that they killed somebody. This is weird for me. This shouldn't be really a debate. Like, if anybody else were to go over to your friend, I guess, it doesn't even matter if it's a stranger, walks over, crushes somebody's neck, and kills them, they would be charged with murder. If you're talking about anybody else who walks into somebody else's house with a gun and shoots them while they're asleep in bed and they die, they should be charged with murder. They should, at the very least, be fired, but then be charged with murder. The idea that cops have this get out of prison free card or get out of justice card because they wear a uniform is completely ridiculous. Black lives should matter, but they don't. In this system, in this current system. That's what the rioting and the looting's about. It's not to do with poverty wage gap. It's not to do with Corona. Corona kind of exacerbated it to a certain extent and did make people's stress levels go up, maybe. But the connection between COVID-19 and the connection between COVID and Black Lives Matter, there's no reason to depict it with a black angry man and someone who's like committing violence in and of himself and other black people committing violence and the one, oh no, poor unfortunate white person. Really? That is not how you want to depict this. If the point you were trying to make is about wage disparity, or the point you were trying to make was about COVID-19 and Corona, you should be depicting people who have part-time jobs who are being exposed to COVID-19 in their daily lives, such as Uber Eats. You could have had a video where you talked about a black guy who had to go and do Uber Eats every day, caught COVID-19, and then subsequently died. Or if you wanted to really talk about the wage disparity, you could do one where you have two men who are both in business suits and go into an interview, and the white guy gets the job and the black guy doesn't. And the black guy continues to go to job interviews, goes to say 20 different job interviews, never gets the job, but the white guy does. You could have depicted all of this. You also could have depicted, maybe, I guess, you could have also depicted in Japan, white guy going in for a job at an elementary school and a black guy going for a job at an elementary school and the black guy getting rejected over and over and over again, even though he might have an actual gen ed degree from America. But then white dude doesn't have that. All he wants to do is a 2-year gap between now and going back to grad school. And he just wants to have some vacation time, and so he's going to call off every other day. Okay, we're going to cut off that. It's really hard in Japan already for black people to get jobs. Just fact. It is really hard because of this stereotype of angry black man or angry black woman, because it's different kinds of stereotype, but it's there. The idea that black people are scary and intimidating and, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's around in this culture. It's hard enough for black people to get jobs in Japan because of the angry black man stereotype already. This doesn't help. This harms. This actually can do harm. And I know that NHK has apologized and they said that, like, we've taken it down because people found it offensive. And it's like, no, it was offensive. It is part of this cultural idea, this shared idea that black men cannot be trusted and black men will get violent and black men will get angry. And that is racist. Once again, I should reiterate, I'm a white person. I don't speak for black people. So calling something racist and discriminatory for me, especially when it seems obvious, Like, okay, but there may be some people who disagree with me, and there may be some people who think that maybe I'm looking too hard into it. Fine. But considering the amount of black people who called this racist, I think I'm safe. TBS isn't any better, and TBS decided to host a actual white supremacist on its news channel to talk about Black Lives Matter. That was great. And then Atsugi Jason, who also got to have some time to talk about Black Lives Matter, also a very, very white man. He's a comedian. You might know him from the "Why Japanese People" joke. So a comedian got to talk about Black Lives Matter, and he's white. And a white supremacist got to talk about Black Lives Matter. Yay, super fun. You know who hasn't yet talked about Black Lives Matter, as far as I can see from any news agency on any kind of panel? Black people. And this isn't one of those things where you could just be like, oh, there are no black people available to talk. Black people live in Japan. There's actually a whole YouTube channel that I've started watching recently called The Black Experience in Japan. It's really good. You should take a look and watch it. It's very much worth the watch. And it's got so many different perspectives. Highly recommend it. And also we have black vloggers. We have black bloggers in Japan. There's a blog that's called The Black Man in Japan. It is all about that. We have Bae McNeil, who is a columnist for the Japan Times, who often writes about blackface and writes about these issues in a column. Often. Bae McNeil has lived in Japan for such a long time. He's fluent in Japanese. Why would you not ask him to come on to any program and explain this from his perspective as a black man? But that's not what they want. What they want is to have an expert who can tell them that, this is still a foreign thing. This is still a white person problem. This is still something we don't have to think about and something we don't have to actually unlearn and unpack. This is something that's happening in America. This is something that's happening abroad. It's not happening here. Even though by suppressing black voices, it actually is happening here. And by depicting something like that on NHK, it is happening here. Okay. So, the last thing I want to talk about is on Sunday, on June 14th, there is a peaceful march for Black Lives Matter that will be hosted in Tokyo. Okay, several things to note before going to this peaceful march. Do not call it a protest, because it's not a protest, it is a peaceful march. Also, if you are a foreigner who lives in Japan, you are not protected under the Constitution to do a protest. Therefore, don't call it a protest in anything that you post on social media, period. Be sure to put it as a peaceful march. Also, if you are having a fever on the day of, or you have any symptoms of COVID-19, of course, do not go to this event. If you are feeling bad and you are feeling sick, do not go to this event. Again, this pandemic is still ongoing. It is still a problem. You should be careful, and if you feel sick, you should not go. Everybody is being asked, if you are going on June 14th, to wear a mask. And if you can, during the march, try to keep your distance from other people. I know, I'm aware. Marches mean that you are probably going to have to be close to people, especially considering how they do marches in Japan. They're usually pretty close. Now, I'm going to ask you, if you are like me and you are a white person, this is not going to be on any of the posters, don't talk to the news. Straight up. Don't do it. Do not give them a soundbite to put a white face onto the news. Especially considering the fact that they're putting so many white faces already to talk about Black Lives Matter. Don't let them do it. Instead, what I want for you to do is, whenever they ask you for a soundbite, say no and point to an organizer or point to somebody who is black in the crowd. Say, please talk to them. Say no, please talk to them. We need to have black voices talk about this. We need to have Japanese voices talk about this, because this is happening in Japan. We need to have them get their voices out there. Last week I did a Breonna Taylor Blackout Tuesday sort of style video. I was a little late because it was supposed to be on Tuesday, but I have my things on Wednesday, so I decided to do it that way. I'm going to go on Sunday. I'm very nervous about this. I also, though, if I'm feeling sick beforehand, I might not go, or if I feel bad, just because, of course, COVID-19. But I would like to go and support. I intend to go mainly because I want to put up a sign for Breonna Taylor. I'm really worried about her case being forgotten in everything that's going on. I know the FBI has opened its investigation up, but I really worry that she's not going to find justice, and I really worry that she's just going to get forgotten in this whole thing. So, if you can attend, please do. But again, if you are white, be sure to amplify the voices that need to be heard. Thank you. All right, I'm probably going to get a whole lot of white supremacists in the comments, and I'm going to get a lot of people that say racism doesn't exist in Japan and discrimination is not a thing, in which case you're wrong. But yeah, it's going to be fun to report and block that. All right, I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye. Stay safe. I love you. See you next time.